The Florida Panthers introduced Paul Maurice as their new head coach Thursday morning at FLA Live Arena. We'll be talking about what he said in the press conference and break it all down here today with Nick Fairbanks on this Fairbanks Friday on the Friday edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast.
Your Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
And welcome into this Friday, June 24th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez from PantherParkway.com, and you can follow me on Twitter at Monoman12. Follow the show account on Twitter at LO_FLA Panthers. And thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. Don't forget to also subscribe to Locked On NHL and the Crosscheck NHL show with Andrew Berkshire and Mary Clark. They'll be covering all the postseason activities around the National Hockey League. So, Cats fans, like I said at the top, the Florida Panthers introduced Paul Maurice as their new head coach yesterday at FLA Live Arena in a 10 a.m. press conference. Got a lot of people there from all the local affiliates. I unfortunately was not able to be there in person due to my day job, but I was able to watch the whole thing after the fact and really got to digest everything and really got to think about everything that Paul Maurice said. And even prior to all of that, hearing what he said when he resigned from the position with the Winnipeg Jets, one takeaway that I just had overall is that this guy this is a guy that when he talks you listen, and I can hear this guy talk for hours. And let me actually bring in my guest on the show where we'll talk about the things that he did in fact say in the press conference. So it's Friday, which means that it's a Fairbanks Friday edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. So, Nick, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, and it's very much an exciting Fairbanks Friday edition on Locked On Panthers, and happy to be here again. So thank you again, Armando.
Absolutely, man. Let's get right into it. So when Paul Maurice spoke about how the phone call went when it came to him and Bill Zito, he spoke about how it was an overwhelming process, but he didn't mean overwhelming in a bad way, about how he just loved talking about hockey with Bill Zito, and that Bill Zito can talk for hours, and just within 15 minutes, he knew that it was going to be a great fit. And he also mentioned that he had never met Bill Zito in person, but he knew people who connected to him. And of course, when you're in that hockey community, and especially in the NHL level, and one person's going to say this, and that's going to be passed on to how great or not great somebody is. And just from what we hear, of course, we don't know everything that went on behind the scenes. It just seems that what they said in person seems to be that they had a really good conversation. There was a lot of smiles. There was a lot of nodding. There was a lot of saying, this guy kind of knows what he's talking about.
Yeah, and when you hear Paul talk, I mean, I think he had talked about it. I can't remember if he said it just during the press conference or if it was during the Merrick show earlier today, that they had talked for 10 hours during the first interview.
Mm-hmm.
Can you imagine talking for that long? But my mind, when I heard that, is, okay, number one, I think Paul gets it. Number two, I think Zito understood that he gets it. And number three, they both had the same goal in mind. You can win the regular season and look fantastic like the Florida Panthers did this past season. It doesn't mean a thing once the Stanley Cup playoffs start. You can't play the same way. You have to play a dirtier game, and not, a bad dirty game, but you have to get those dirty crease goals. You got to be able to play defensive hockey, and you got to know when to clamp down defensively. So I think they picked the right guy, and I do honestly think that Bill Zito did do his due diligence, kind of feeling out everybody who, was possible to come in, and I thought he made the best choice possible.
Mm-hmm. Not only was there at one point a 10-hour conversation on the phone, mind you, when he mentioned
Mm-hmm.
he also spoke about how this process started 10 days ago, right before their press conference. So that just goes to show that not only that they did an extensive interview process with Paul Maurice, but of course who knows what they did with everyone else as well, breaking every single thing, pros and cons of what this guy brings to the table. Is this guy the right fit? And also what I took away from it was, once again, when somebody from the outside is looking in, talking about your team, that whenever you're in the building every day and critiquing your own, it's a little harder for you to critique what you have right in front of you, because of course everyone's ego can get in the way. Everyone has an ego. And of course, when you hear someone from the outside talking about your team and seeing what they bring, it's like, maybe we do need to bring someone from the outside. So I think it's a good opportunity for a little bit of a change. I mean, they don't have to go away completely from who they are. I mean, this is a 122 point team from last season, a 58 win team. And he even said it himself. He also talked about the little things, about a full 60-minute game. He even said this, not a 65-minute game, which implies this, Nick, that the amount of overtime games that the Panthers were in, of course, they won a lot of them. I mean, I on the top of my head, I think they won 13 overtime games before it can even get into a shootout. But those 5 extra minutes logged that tires out a team. But it's also talking about playing a complete 60. He also talked about the play of how these players play away from the puck as well. And of course, he talked about the process of coming to work every day, doing the work every day, and the little things. And with the experience that Paul Maurice has, I have no doubt that he is going to apply that with this team.
The merit of a good manager is being able to take off the rose-colored glasses and see the organization or the team that you have in front of you, and be able to see its strengths and weaknesses, and to address, those weaknesses, and also applaud those strengths. So I think Bill definitely did that in this process. But then Paul is now being brought in to help out with those deficiencies that the Florida Panthers did have during the playoffs, and also, during, that second round sweep from the Tampa Bay Lightning. But I think this team does have it to come to work every day and work. I mean, they're led by Alexander Barkov, Sergei Bobrovsky, probably 2 of the hardest working players in the league when it comes to, just getting mentally and physically ready for each game. But where the change is going to come is this team going to be more direct in what they want to do, or are they going to be more passive? And I think what Paul was alluding to is, hey, listen, it doesn't need to be pretty in order to score or win. We need to be defensively responsible and not put ourselves in situations that are, going to put our defense on their heels and put us out of position. So I think he understands what they need, and he's going to implement it. And it's not going to happen, like that. It's not going to happen right out of training camp. It's going to be a process over the season. So when they get to the playoffs again next year, hopefully, they should already have it ingrained in how they need to play and what is expected in order to get to the Stanley Cup and win it overall.
And he even mentioned it as well when he was asked by Mike DePasquale of WSVN about talking about whenever it comes to the mission, when it comes to coming into his first season as a team. And he spoke about how the Cup run doesn't happen in October, but that we can guarantee he can guarantee that this is going to be a team that's going to work their asses off from the time October starts, because this is about creating good habits along the way. And we even spoke about it as well. I spoke about this with you. I spoke about this with Jacob. Spoke about this with Frank. This team is a pissed off bunch going into next season after the great season that they have, multiple records, so many to name. Not going to rehash all of those again, maybe on another day. But he spoke about investing every day in the future and just keeping the focus there as well. But I also want to talk a little bit about his about kind of a refresh and a reset for Paul Maurice. He even spoke about when he was fired the first time from Carolina by Jim Rutherford. Florida Panther fans definitely know about Jim Rutherford from their recent trade with the Pittsburgh Penguins for Patrick Hornqvist. So when he was fired by Jim Rutherford, he was talking about how not necessarily thanking him, but saying about how he was burnt out as well from that time, because of course he's a human being. Let's first and foremost, he is that. And whenever you're somewhere for a long time as well, and sometimes your mind can go in a little bit of a plateau whenever you're at a place. Second day in a row that I'm using that word. And he got an opportunity to reset, and happened the same thing here. And assuming he got a 3-year deal from what's reported, but if he's with this team for a long time, assuming that he is, and he gets burnt out again, I'm not necessarily gonna. I'm saying this now. I don't think I can be angry about that as well, because he's gotten so many years under his belt that with the travel, with the grind, and he also talked about the external factors that helped him during his time off as well. That's gonna help him reset here. So I think it's a really good opportunity.
So two things about that, because I think I personally kind of fall into this type of mindset. I can understand where Paul's coming from, where he gets burnt out. He gets let go from a job in Carolina, and he was burnt out, and he thanks Jimmy Rutherford. That tells me two things. Number one, that he really cared about what he was doing and the process that he put in, and he cared about his players. And secondly, that he came to work every single day and did his absolute most and best that he could. And you could probably say that about what he did in Winnipeg too, which is why he had to step aside. And he decided to, is because he understood exactly where the team was and that he had nothing left. He had no more avenues to go down to help this team, and they needed a new voice. I mean, think about working for the same person for 8 years. It kind of just becomes redundant, and you just don't know what else to kind of come at, or like how to motivate somebody after a while. If you've been with somebody for 8 years, you kind of just like, well, you kind of you already know what is expected. But, hats off to him for actually hanging it up and wanting to do better for the organization that did well by him and keeping him on as long. But I think the nice thing about him coming down to Florida is that it's going to be a different atmosphere. Obviously, he's going to have South Florida, kind of like what he had in Raleigh a little bit, but a little bit warmer, more beach access, hopefully. And he'll be able to hopefully unwind and not have to burn himself out as quickly. I think he is kind of betting on himself with this new position because,
yes,
listen, he's got a Ferrari that he's going to be able to drive now. And he said this, he's not putting brakes on the Ferrari. It's learning how to drive that Ferrari while in the rain. So what an analogy to put on, and the kind of mindset that he already knows that he's walking into, and he's ready to go. So I couldn't be happier with kind of, what he's been able to do, step away, recharge, re-energize, and now he's back, and he's going to be able to give it his all. And hopefully that ends with a cup win for the Florida Panthers.
Mm-hmm. And we'll definitely discuss more of that in the next segment, because there's so much more to talk about when it comes to this. So we're going to talk about that more in segment number 2. But first, we're going to tell you all about BetOnline. And BetOnline.net is your number one source for all your betting needs and sports info. Find all the latest sports development and league reviews and news, including this year's Stanley Cup playoffs and Major League Baseball. BetOnline is your continuous source for all your sports wagering information, including live betting, esports, and scores. And BetOnline.net remains the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, news this season. BetOnline.net is the fastest and easiest way to check on all your favorite sports and events, including MMA, boxing, and golf. Visit the website today, to learn more about the trends and action. BetOnline, where the game starts. Second segment here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. I'm Armando Velez. I got Nick Fairbanks here on this Fairbanks Friday edition of the show. So you actually mentioned something about the beach access for Paul Maurice. And, you know, I always say this saying, nature is healing when it comes to it. And if there is a time that the going does get tough for Paul Maurice, I hope that he does take a little bit of time to actually take those little bits of walk on the beach as well, if necessary, during his time off. And one thing I kind of wish that he kind of spoke about was what he kind of did during this time off in order to get his mind in the right place. Because of course I think there should be no issue with us talking about that, whether it's doing some yoga, going to the gym, some meditation as well. And I part of me kind of wish that he got that out there in order for, because these coaches are also they're role models, they're an inspiration. And of course, voicing that out loud could possibly influence someone out there, whether it's a Panthers fan or just a hockey fan in general, to get into a better headspace than what they were before. So that's something that I kind of thought about when you were talking about beach access when it comes to that.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of allows you to kind of look back and be able to think about maybe possible decisions that you've made, or, it opens up your mind to other possibilities of things that you want to be able to accomplish. And, I don't know what it does for other people, but for me, I'm okay with just laying on the beach and kind of just allowing my thoughts to kind of like flow through me, and um, just relax, take all that tension, that anxiety away, and just be like, hey, listen, I'm in this beautiful part of the world right now. I'm able to sit here. What's so bad or what's so strenuous about life right now? Everything can just fall away. And I think that's something that, should be a little bit talked about more. I wonder if players even do that. I just think about Carter Verhaeghe and Jonathan Huberdeau driving like little scooters around Fort Lauderdale and stuff like that during the playoffs, and that was kind of scary. And maybe that's their way of unwinding. That's their thing. But maybe this will be a new outlet for him, and he'll be surrounded by a community that's now started to really embrace his franchise, as we've seen in the last couple of years, and especially at home games. So that was definitely one other thing that he didn't mention was that when he was up in Winnipeg, Canada, they weren't having any fans in the stands, and that really was bumming him out, because they really kind of mess with how he coaches and how he feels games and how he looks at games, just the whole environment itself. And now you have a team that's kind of coming together and starting to put everything in one basket right now, trying to win the cup, and you have fans on top of that. So I think it's all a great atmosphere for him to come into. But also, if he wants to leave it, you got a couple miles out to the east and you have nothing but beach, just to kind of like let your problems and everything melt away.
Yeah, and being at games 1, 4, and 5 of the first round, and I kind of got a little bit of that adrenaline rush when it comes to the glass case of emotions, when it comes to like the up and downs of a hockey game. And the fact that he couldn't get that, at which I don't want to hear anyone ever say that the crowd does not have an impact when it comes to a hockey game or any sport in general, because they definitely do. And remember when the Florida Panthers did play the Winnipeg Jets, that was at the time in around January, where the Omicron variant was going around still. And Canada was, I think Winnipeg at the time only put 250 fans in the stands in that game specifically, that the Florida Panthers were playing Winnipeg. And he did resign before that, though.
Correct.
But the fact that it lays an impact on the mindset and the emotion that goes into that game. Not saying that they can't create their own. That's not what I'm saying. But that can play a big factor. And he said that quote on the Jeff Merrick show, and that affected him as well. But let's talk a little bit about Bill Zito, about what he was asked about different experience that comes to it. And he was asked about it. He was asked by David Wilson of the Miami Herald, and he gave a lot of kudos to Bruno. Said that he came into a really difficult situation, something that we've hashed on already on the show as well.
Mhm.
But he mentioned a little something that we all have talked about as well. So this is something that Bill Zito is very aware of. He mentioned the cap when it comes to the Panthers offseason. And the fact that he kind of said that out loud in the press conference goes to show that he's already starting to lay the groundwork. I know we've seen recent reports of like what they're trying to do with possibly Sergei Bobrovsky, even keeping 50%. But it just goes to show that this job for coach, GM, even if they're in the off season, it's an everyday process. They're there for long hours, and this just also goes to show how badly Bill Zito wants to win.
Definitely, and he's we've spoken on this in a couple of other shows, and I know you and Jacob have talked about it as well, that in a way he's still trying to clean up some of the contracts that Dale Talon unfortunately signed some players to. I mean, Bobrovsky was a huge need. Luongo was on his last leg literally of his career, and what other goaltender were the Florida Panthers going to go out and get? They wanted the big fish. They wanted the two-time Vezina winner. And unfortunately, it just didn't work out the first 2 years. And finally, the third year, it finally clicked. But, to pay $10 million for a goaltender just probably is not the wisest way to use the cap, especially with more contracts coming up. You have Jonathan Huberdeau. You're going to have probably Aaron Ekblad in the next couple of years. That's probably going to need an extension. You got to wonder what's going to happen with Mackenzie Weegar too, if you're going to decide to bring him back and then pay him. But this job is more than just choosing the right coach. It's making sure you have the right personnel on your team, surrounding you, and then also making sure that you have the right players in place to make everything successful. And sometimes tough decisions need to be made. And unfortunately, it sounds like that. Somebody like Sergei Bobrovsky or even Patrick Hornquist could be one of those contracts that unfortunately had to be sacrificed for the betterment of the team.
It's likely at this point that it's going to be more Patrick Hornquist than Sergei Bobrovsky based on the clauses that they have in their contract. Mm-hmm. So I'm still not betting on Bobrovsky being traded. I just think that's going to be really hard to make happen. And the ball is in Bobrovsky's court on whether he wants to make that trade happen as well. But also, one thing I really took away from what Paul Maurice said was talking about critiquing his own performance. And after a certain amount of time, when you're in this league, sometimes when you've done something wrong and when you've done something right. And the fact that Paul Maurice says that he's able to critique his own performance and say when the time is up for him, it's also very admirable as well. And I don't think, even if he's not in the position to walk away here, I think that instead of what we saw with Bruno was critiquing himself after the fact. And of course that comes with inexperience. And that's not to crap on Bruno. But the fact that we're going to see self-critique as well, we're probably going to see that a lot in post-game pressers, like immediate, especially which we don't wish this to happen, but if the Florida Panthers happen to get blown out in a game, you're likely going to see Paul Maurice just taking the blame right away and being accountable right away and not putting things towards other things like officiating or even throwing a goalie under the bus.
Yeah, and that'll be something that I think I'm going to look forward to. I mean, I always enjoyed Q's press conferences because you could read a lot into what he was saying and also not saying. I also think Paul is going to say exactly what he thinks. I think it's going to be refreshing to hear his insights into the game and what decisions were made and why. And he's going to be mad with himself with some decisions that he made, but it'll be refreshing to see, like, hey, I made a decision, I messed up, I need to be better, and this is what we're going to do going forward, instead of, oh, well, we'll go to practice tomorrow and, we'll figure it out. Or, like Bruno said, it's, during the season, we'll use the last couple of games to kind of figure out our defensive identity. Like, no, you should have been working on that, like, the whole season, to get prepared for it. And, maybe listen to your gut instead of, the outside, because listen, you played in the league for a long time, and, you've been around other organizations. So, maybe trust yourself a little bit more. And maybe we'll get that out of Paul. I really hope we see that. And, as you said, I hope we get to see the self critique, in a week or in a game on game or a week on week basis.
No doubt. And I spoke about it. I spoke about it even before we hit record on the show, putting in the group chat saying, I really like how this guy speaks. And then Frank Rikus was talking about how it kind of reminded him of Mike Keenan. And that was before my time of being a Panthers fan, but definitely not the first coach that Panther fans are going to like what they hear when it comes to what he says after, especially after a win, or especially after and of course being honest, because we are in fact the hardest people to critiquing the self is the hardest person to critique. It's easy to do it to other people, but it's harder to definitely do it to us.
So one thing I want to share with you, and also everybody who's listening, if you want to get an idea of what Paul Maurice is like when he's trying to build up a team or build up a particular player, go listen to what he said to Kevin Weeks when Kevin Weeks was a Carolina Hurricane getting ready for a playoff game. I guarantee you, this is the guy you want talking to your players and getting you ready going into a game. I mean, like, I wanted to run through a brick wall, and he wasn't even talking to me. But what he said to Weeksy not only was hilarious to me, but secondly, it's just like, okay, this guy believes in me. I'm going to go out and do the job. And he ended up doing it. But I'm telling you, you got to listen to what Weeksy says and how he says it, because he sounds just like him. Mm-hmm. He does a pretty good impersonation.
Mm-hmm. One other note that before we transition over to the third segment as well is that his son got accepted to the University of Miami, and hey, his son will likely not be taking those student loans with that school being as expensive as it is. So his son is also in a great position if he decides to go to the University of Miami. He got accepted, but didn't say any word of whether he's actually going to go there or not. So also a good situation for the whole Maurice family, not only Paul, but his wife and his child as well. So happy for that family as well. But we're going to transition over to the next segment where we are going to discuss what happened in Game 4 of the Stanley Cup Final. So we're going to discuss that all and more here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast.
Your Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Third and final segment here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast on this Fairbanks Friday edition of the show. I'm Armando Velez. I got Nick Fairbanks here. So, Nick, when Frank and I were recording last night, it was in the middle of the second period, and we discussed a little bit about how the Tampa Bay Lightning were just, even though possession and offensive zone time for the Avalanche was very controlled, they weren't getting the shots on goal that they needed for the first period, but then they just came firing in the second period. Outshot the Tampa Bay Lightning in the second period, 33-16 as far as shot attempts. And then they, even though at one point it was 18-4 in shots on goal, and then only lost that advantage by 2. And then we see Nathan McKinnon get a goal, and then that controversial play at the very, very end of the game where Darcy Kemper there was a stat on like goalies with an assist in the Stanley Cup final. If I'm not mistaken, I think he's the first goalie to have an assist in a Stanley Cup final game, if I'm not mistaken. So
That's amazing.
Getting the puck out and then Lehkonen getting to Nazem Kadri. Of course, there was that controversial too many men on the ice penalty of what was or wasn't, and then there was shades of Patrick Kane from the 2010 Stanley Cup Final, Game 6, from when he scored the game winner in Philly to win the cup. And I was just thinking, okay, that probably hit the net. And then I see them celebrating, and I was just confused. I'm like, no way this happened again. And I figured out this morning that happened 15 years to the day that Patrick Kane was drafted number 1 overall.
That's amazing, actually.
Yeah.
Two big stats there. So number one, Darcy Kuemper being the first goalie to have an assist in the Stanley Cup game. Think of all the greats that have played the game and that are Hall of Famers, and like I think of like Grant Fuhr, with the with a couple of teams that he played with, considering that he scored a couple goals. I mean, not in the Stanley Cup, but like as a goaltender, he scored a couple goals, but not to assist in a Stanley Cup game is kind of amazing. But the play that we're kind of talking about, the too many men. I don't know. It's interesting to me that they want to make a big deal out of it right now. When you and I were talking about it offline, that I think Tampa benefited from something similar last season when they had 7 guys on the ice and it wasn't called. Sometimes it works in your favor, sometimes it doesn't. I'm not gonna cry too much for Tampa Bay, because listen, I don't think they deserve to win the game. They couldn't hold them down. They couldn't hold Colorado down the whole game. I mean, they did what they usually do in the first period. Panthers fans know this well. I mean, they got in the lanes and they resisted or got blocked a lot of shots, but other than that, it was Colorado's game, and unfortunately, they were just they were the better team. So. John Cooper, for what he was trying to do and frame the situation as it was. Sorry, bud. You have 2 cups already. I wouldn't be whining so much. Go out, win the next game. Get your team ready for the next game. Don't worry about what just happened.
Yeah, and we spoke about this pre-recording as he's using that lawyer talk, and because that was his experience before getting to the NHL about switching a story. And he didn't necessarily say that was too many men on the ice, because that would have resulted in a fine. But he was careful about what words he used so that he wouldn't get fined. And here's the exact stat when it comes to Darcy Kuemper, of the exact wording on what Darcy Kuemper did. So Darcy Kuemper is the first goaltender to assist on an overtime game winner in Stanley Cup history. So that's the exact one of there's probably been assists by goaltenders before in a Stanley Cup final game, but not in an overtime. So we've praised a lot of Igor Shesterkin this season on how he's able to get the puck out quickly for a rush going the other way. But Darcy Kuemper, of course, there's still questions about goaltending in Colorado, but hey, after a bad game in Game 3, Darcy Kuemper was able to bounce back. They were able to protect him as well. I mean, look at the when we talk about also control about what Colorado had in that overtime. I mean, the goal was scored at 12:02 in the overtime period. I mean, 18-8 in shot attempts and shots on goal 10-3 for Colorado. So they were just dominating. And Vasilevsky, there was a big save that he had on O'Connor that Colorado had another chance to have a game winner in that overtime period as well. So the Vasilevsky was keeping them in this game. And also that Victor Hedman goal, it's crazy because the broadcast brought up that was his first backhand goal this season in the regular season and postseason. I mean, I know he finished third in the Norris Trophy voting, but the fact that I kind of saw that as like an FU moment for him not winning Norris. I know he's won one before, but hey, that was a great goal by Victor Hedman to at the time give the Tampa Bay Lightning a lead.
Yeah, I mean, he is one of the best defensemen for a reason, and he's got really good hands. it's something that I think he's kind of had to develop, outside of, being the giant of a defenseman he is. Um, but at the same time, I think after, Tampa took that 2-1 lead is when kind of the game decided to turn and Colorado kind of took things seriously and started turning the game over in their favor. But to be honest with you, I think the series is over.
Mm-hmm.
I equate what happened last night to what happened in Game 2 of the Florida Tampa series. I think the air out of the balloon just came out, or it popped, whatever you want to call it. And I think John Cooper's press conference kind of sealed the deal for me on that. I think he's feeling pretty defeated about that. So I think tomorrow Colorado seals it, and they get their third cup in 30 years, something like that. Or hold on, 25, 26 years. Yeah.
Yeah, they moved from Quebec over to Colorado around the same time that the Florida Panthers were in their inception. So yes. So yeah, the Colorado Avalanche one win away from lifting Lord Stanley's Cup. I did tweet this out from the Locked On Florida Panthers page. It was Alexa, play "Are You Dead Yet" by Children of Bodom. So they're unfortunately not around anymore, but that was a really big band that I listened to growing up. David Lasseter is definitely very familiar with that group. They're actually from Anton Lundell's hometown in Espoo. Fun fact.
That's right. That's right. You guys are talking about that. That's actually kind of ironic in a way, but no, that's a good catch by you.
Yeah, I looked it up yesterday. I was like, I knew they were from Finland, but I was like, which town are they? And I thought Espoo, and the first thing I thought of was Anton Lundell. One more thing about the Stanley Cup Final is when it comes to not the Stanley Cup Final. Actually, let's go a little bit to Paul Maurice. Is that one thing that is a criticism of Paul Maurice? Is development of young players and questions about it. And the first one I actually thought of was Anton Lundell as well. And of course, with how he performed in the second round, of course, resulted in a little bit of a benching, which it's not a detriment to his development. It's just a young player going through his lumps. But the fact that he's had the time in Finland as well in Helsinki, I don't think it's going to be the same situation where Paul Maurice is going to hold someone back like Anton Lundell. The fact that he's had a pro career over there, and the fact that he's had one season under his belt. If it were his rookie season and Paul Maurice was coming in, I think that it could possibly be a different story. But the fact that he has already have that one season in, I'm not necessarily concerned.
So I'm going to equate, well, I don't want to equate it, but I want to kind of give a comparison. So we know Patrick Laine was drafted by the Jets, and he played for them for a long time, and unfortunately got traded out because he just wasn't working out. Well, why wasn't he working out? He was a one-way player. He scored goals. I mean, yeah, there would be some highlight goals where he would get the puck and take it end to end and score, but that's about it. What's Anton Lundell's game? He plays both ends of the ice, and if anything, his defensive game is arguably better than his offensive game. So the fact that the coaching staff previous to Paul Maurice trusted him that much to give him the third line duties, and possibly now going to be moving him up to possibly second, I think Paul is going to have the same respect and also the same mindset going into this season with Anton Lundell, knowing that he can trust him and he plays the exact right way that Paul is going to expect his centermen to play.
Mm-hmm. And during Paul Maurice's time in Winnipeg, it's been more of an offensive team that he's had there, and the fact that we could say at this point in time that Anton Lundell's defensive game is better than his offensive game at this point in time. Of course, that can change, but the fact that he's got that down, I think that it could possibly be a level up once Paul Maurice gets here. So, but that's something that we could talk about in like for like multiple minutes here. So we're kind of
I have one more point.
Okay.
Name me one Panthers coach that's been known to develop talent.
On the top of my head, I mean, when you think about tenure, as far as I've followed this team, there hasn't been coaches that have even been here long enough to develop it.
I think the closest thing that they've ever had was Roger Nielsen.
Mm-hmm.
That like their first coach, that was it.
Mm-hmm.
I honestly don't see any other coach that they had that was good with young players or being able to shape them into, superstars. I mean, you could probably say Mike Keenan because he unlocked Ali Jokinen, but Ali wasn't, that young. He was in his mid-20s when he finally took off, and it just took the right type of coaching, the right type of mentoring that got him going. And I don't think Florida's too worried about developing right now. They're in it to win it in the next couple of years. And, we've already sold a lot of the draft capital. So it's like, hey, we're in it now and we need to win right now.
Now's the time.
Exactly.
And we could talk about that way more full as, I mean, we're only in June. I mean, opening night is like less than 4 months away. Crazy.
Only 4 months.
Only 4 months. So we have a whole off season to put a bigger perspective into that. But Nick, I want to thank you once again for joining this Fairbanks Friday edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Tell everybody where they can find you online.
Armando, thank you again for having me on. It's always enjoyable to do these Fairbanks Friday episodes. But with everybody listening, thank you again for listening. You can even watch us on YouTube. But you guys, Twitter at Prudentious0, and also find my work on PantherParkway.com.
Definitely. And we are 1 subscriber away from 100 subscribers on the YouTube channel. So go ahead and subscribe to the channel so you can see both our beautiful faces and, of course, Jacob's beautiful face when he comes on Fridays, and Frank once in a while, and everyone else who comes on Locked On Panthers. So subscribe to the show. So Nick, thank you once again.
Anytime. And let's get that 100th subscriber.
Absolutely. And if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast so you'll be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Don't forget to also subscribe to Locked On NHL and the Crosscheck NHL show with Andrew Berkshire and Mary Clark, who will be covering all the postseason activities around the National Hockey League. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. And for your second listen of the day, make sure you listen to today's episode of Locked On NHL. From each round to the Stanley Cup kiss, Locked On NHL has you covered every Monday through Friday. It's free and available wherever you get podcasts. So I'm Armando Velez with Nick Fairbanks, and you've been listening to Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day.